Hello, world historians. It's Dr. Smith here. I hope you're all having a good weekend and enjoying the cicadas. So, I just wanted to update you all for the beginning of Module 2. I did post, I think, the midterm study guide, the study guide for the midterm exam. There is only one midterm exam for this class. It's worth 200 points. I wanted to clarify it's not actually due this week. It will be due next week, which will be, or at least Wednesday, the 9th of June. So if you check your calendars, Wednesday, 9th of June, Canvas assignments will be open for submission. Now, I do stick with a midterm format, even though it's only a 6-week class. But I make some concessions because it's online. So open note, open book is fine. Obviously, I don't, expect to proctor an exam online. But I will remind you, obviously, that Turnitin will be enabled for the midterm exam. So if you can make sure that where you quote from the book, particularly when you quote from Robert Marx's Origins of the Modern World, again, just follow the in parenthesis MLA quotation style. Make sure basically that any direct quotation is referenced through citation and quotation marks, so there's no confusion. The exam as well is broken into two sections. I'll just say briefly, one section is worth 3 times as much as the other section. So that also tells you perhaps how much attention and focus you should give to that final section, the essay section, as opposed to the ID terms. The ID terms are really just short definitions, if you like. Think of it almost like a dictionary definition, just showing that you've digested and understood some of the study terms related to the chapters we're reading for this first half of the semester, chapters 1, 2, 3 of Origins of the Modern World. So think of, the 5 generic questions that you would go through, not like a checklist, not like bullet points, but try to do like 4 to 5 sentences for each of these ID terms. So who, what, when, where, and why, or how important. So who, what, when, where, and why. Think of the 5 W's. If you could sort of try and incorporate those in complete sentences, write a short paragraph on each of the terms. They might be places, people, ideas from the time period that we've been looking at in world history. Try not to overdo the ID terms. I don't want people to be writing 15-page research essays on Christopher Columbus or whatever the term happens to be. The point here is not just to show that you've read and understood the term, but that you can convey information in a concise and thoughtful way. So that's why I say briefly identify in 4 to 5 sentences, ideally, each of these terms, and you choose 5 to write about. So some of the terms will be eliminated from the list that appears on the study guide. So try and familiarize yourself with all of them. And again, try not to write too much on each of the ID terms. If you write, 3 or 4 pages on an ID term, you're not going to get extra points. And in fact, if you write too much, you might actually lose points because you're not focusing, you're not being concise and focusing on the key details. So what I want you to bring across in your ID responses is these are the key details. This is why these terms are important, how they connect in terms of geography, in terms of time, but also in terms of significance and relationship to the other concepts that we've been studying in world history. So that's part 1, ID terms. Now, I will just sort of briefly talk about the essay section, but I also say if you guys between now and June 9th, obviously not during June 9th, but before then, if you want to send me an outline, questions, or a rough draft of your essays for informal feedback, then that's something I'm happy to do for everyone in the class. That's something, again, just send it to me by email, smithmd6 at miamioh.edu. So the 2 questions Again, for the essay, worth 150 points. So what I suggest here is maybe 4 to 5 full paragraphs, and by full paragraphs I mean more than a sentence, but really showing out your connection, engagement with the material, and your development of the concepts, the key concepts over time. So be aware of the time periods that the prompts are focusing on. Be aware of the geographical focus, the lens of geography, if we're talking about a certain part of the world or a certain concept. So the first option, again, choose one of these. Both will be available on the midterm exam, but choose one to write about. And the first one is to describe the Columbian Exchange, which is actually mentioned in chapter 3 of the book. But the Columbian Exchange is actually just a term that historians use, which describes the exchange of things like plants, animals, also diseases, germs, bacteria, viruses, that kind of thing, and human culture and population across the Atlantic Ocean in both directions, following the discovery of America by Columbus in 1492, and I should stress as well, over subsequent generations. So we're not just talking about here a snapshot of the world in 1500 and how it was impacted by Christopher Columbus. We're talking about the environmental history and how those transformations played out over the course of centuries, with a particular focus on human populations. So we're looking here, when I ask you to choose 3 different parts of the world that were affected by the Columbian Exchange, you're not just talking here about America and Europe, but you could also be talking about Africa or even other parts of the world that were affected. And you can just define those regions narrowly or broadly, so long as you're consistent. So that's number 1. Again, if you have any questions about any of these essay prompts, just send me an email, and I'm happy to either explain by email or in greater detail. The third question, or the second question, sorry, I should say, is to give 3 examples of commodities or luxury goods whose supply and demand shaped globalization. And here we're talking the period 1400 to 1700. So again, 300 years of world history. So be aware that what the world was like in 1400 was very different than the world in 1700, just as the world in 1700 is very different from the world today. So if you're not focusing as well as on the exchange of commodities and the trade of luxury goods, things like silver, sugar, spice, slavery, they don't all begin with the letter S, but those would be some good examples. And cotton textiles might be another one. But try to think as well about how those networks of exchange, the supply and demand for certain goods, not only illustrated connections in geographical terms, but also changes over time. So we might look at the impact, for example, of European merchants in the Indian Ocean. This is something which is kind of an ignition point for globalization, probably around the 16th century. So again, just look at the questions very carefully. Be aware of every angle that the question is asking. They're pretty straightforward, but they do require a little bit of kind of introduction. Three examples. So I was working out the examples in your paragraph form, and then ideally a conclusion which kind of ties all the loose ends together, compare and contrast, and really develops your thinking on the question. So obviously the essay questions are a little bit more analytical and a little bit more an opportunity for you guys to show not just your reading of the material, but also your application and your critical thinking. So that's it on the midterm exam. Again, due Wednesday, June 9th. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Otherwise, I look forward to catching up with you all on next week for week 2, module 2. I will be posting a short introductory video to chapter 2, Robert Marx's Origins of the Modern World. So stay posted for that one as well. And have a good week, everyone. Talk soon. Bye.